Agreed. Sénatrice Galvez.
Thank you, colleagues. Chers sénateurs, je me lève aujourd'hui pour parler.
Dear Senators, today I rise today to speak at second reading to Bill C-45.
Acceptance for the use of cannabis among baby boomers and millennials. However, for my generation, the parents of millennials, recreational cannabis consumption raises many public health and safety concerns. According to UNICEF, Canadian teenagers use cannabis more than the youth in other developed countries. As a nation, young people are our intellectual and social capital. They assume the responsibility to stimulate development, peace, democracy, and to promote Canadian values. A healthy environment for the development of youth is through increased social awareness, education, satisfying employment, and entrepreneurship. J'ai lu la législation proposée, conscient que la situation.
I read the proposed legislation conscious of the pressing need to decriminalize cannabis possession and to eliminate the crime that stems from the black market. However, the scope of the effects of cannabis use among youth have been known for many years now. The government could have long ago created education and awareness-raising programs on the dangers of cannabis abuse, or motivate youth through the implementation of programs on creation, sport, science, technology, offering them healthy alternatives to cannabis. When we compare C-45 with what the science says or experiences elsewhere in the world, there are a number of gaps and a certain amount of incohesiveness concerning the objectives set out by the government that require reflection and improvement.
That cannabis is addictive. In the short term, it can impair cognitive function and motor coordination. In the long term, it can lead to respiratory problems, cognitive impairments in learning, memory, and attention, increased risk of psychosis, schizophrenia, increased anxiety and depression, and is linked to low-weight babies. Canada is one of the top 10 cannabis-consuming countries in the developed world. Why? Psychosocial studies identify several factors. The effect of THC in relieving stress, anxiety, fear, pain, or anger related to personal, psychological, or family issues. It allows for more intense sensations. Popular culture endorses cannabis use. There is a low perception of harm, and also because of peer or family influence. C-45 will impact several of these factors. Cannabis consumption data reveals a large range of potential users, between 6 and 21% of the Canadian population. Of these users, 0.3% are legally registered to purchase medical cannabis from 88 licensed producers. Recent data shows that the number of medical users has increased to 235,000 in 2017. This fact alone raises great concern about health deterioration if so many Canadians need medical cannabis. Cannabis users represent a very low percentage of the Canadian population, yet this bill appears tailored to their needs. Of the individuals who responded to the government consultation, 79% were medicinal or recreational users of cannabis. Based on this, how we consider these consultations representative of the Canadian population? Are the rights of non-users respected by C-45? Will a child's right to a cannabis-free environment be respected? Will work-related risk to non-users increase after legislation? Moreover, addiction is considered a handicap that requires accommodation. Will this legalization impose higher costs to employers, schools, for accommodations? Who should non-users pay for this? The present medical cannabis situation reveals parallel worlds, that of illegal dispensaries where medical cannabis products with potencies from 2% to 30% THC can be purchased. The other world involves patients being treated at hospitals with cannabidiol or cannabinoid products at very low THC concentrations, from 0.2 to 3%, that are administered via patches, pills, intravenous, or suppositories. In the former, the more visible world, the number of illegal suppliers and dispensaries is unknown. Even the Vancouver-based Canadian Association of Medical Dispensaries doesn't know. A spokesperson, G. Shaw, estimated that there are 90 in Vancouver and 70 in Toronto. In 2016, Globe and Mail investigated cannabis quality in dispensaries. The results showed that some products fail a variety of quality control tests as they contained yeast, mold, unsafe levels of microorganisms, potentially harmful bacteria, and even toxic pesticides. Canadian standards don't require testing for pesticides, yet growers use them to save money. Can it be said that Canadian legislation of medical cannabis was a success? Why, 16 years later, is medical cannabis not sold as a typical pharmaceutical drug? Will legalization recreational cannabis extending from failed medical system has chances to succeed? C-45 is a complete repeal of prohibition and absence of regulation. It transferred the majority of the responsibility of legalization to the province, which in turn are transferring them to municipalities. However, consideration should be made for keeping more controls at the federal level. Following the legislative experience in other jurisdictions, policy experts propose alternatives such as central agency or authority that could better control the supply chain, or a system of non-profit organization or agency that control a few for-profit licenses are good alternatives. Instead, by dispersing responsibility and not establishing clear, measurable goals, C-45 sends mixed message in terms of health, but also what is the real intent of the government. Indeed, the business of cannabis in Canada extends far beyond the health sector. Medical cannabis companies are moving fast to the recreational market. Deloitte and others estimate the value of the Canadian market at $29 billion. Aurora Cannabis is building the world's largest cannabis production facility near Edmonton. Golden Leaf holders are making high-potency recreational products, including oils and edibles. $700 million has been raised just in the last 6 months for cannabis business, with some of these funds coming from fiscal paradise. Policy experts emphasize that achieving the legislative objective, either reducing illegal markets and criminalization of youth, will depend on the retail price of cannabis. Prices will have to be competitive with those offered by illicit cannabis dealers, but prohibit so as to discourage increased use. Further, the infrastructure required to ensure quality control may increase pricing pressure. Despite the need to maintain this delicate balance, the reality is a free JOJO type of market. It is critical to understand that both health and economic sectors agree that increased availability of cheap recreational cannabis will most likely result in an increase in cannabis use. More, experts in the medical sector expect an increase in cannabis abuse and cannabis dependence with legalization, as shown in many studies of young university students in the US. How will legalization limit youth access to cannabis and therefore a decrease in youth consumption? What will happen with medical cannabis dispensaries after legalization? Where is prevention, well known to be the most effective and cheaper method to solve a problem? In the late 2017, the US National Academy of Science released an in-depth report on cannabis. The report's findings are important and revealing. In the past decade, there has been an influx of high-potency cannabis products in the US. For example, Sin Semilla, an engineered plant grown from clones, not from seeds. Data from USDA seizures record a substantial increase in potency, from 4% in the 95 to 30% in 2016. At 30% THC content and higher, users are not seeking recreational effect. As a child psychiatrist said, Today, cannabis is a whole different substance than that idealized by hippies. The only people saying cannabis is not addictive are regular users and vendors. In fact, last year, Colorado proposed an amendment to limit potency of THC in cannabis products to 16%. Not only do we know little about the health risk of high-potency cannabis products, we don't fully understand the effect when cannabis is consumed with other intoxicants. Yet, we know a lot more about cannabis compared to alcohol or tobacco when they enter our lifestyles. Are imports of cannabis seeds being controlled by the SIG Act and Agricultural Canada? Should prices be fixed on THC content rather than weight as recommended by the task force? How will competition be controlled? Can a minimum price be set? Will the product's labels warn about all known adverse health effects? Are we allowing policy to outpace science? Hundreds of studies show that cannabis has negative impact on young developing brains. It affects cognition, academic achievement, and educational outcomes at various degrees via various brain mechanisms at the various degrees of irreversibility. Cannabis impairs the brain function in young people in terms of planning, reasoning, inhibitory process, self-monitoring, and problem-solving. Though the use of neuroimaging techniques, some studies observed alteration on gray and white brain matter. The Centers for Decision-Making, Execution Function, and Communication between brain regions from cannabis use. The medical research has also expressed strong concerns that the potency, frequency, and mode of intake can alter this effect. In one study, from 410 patients with the first episode of psychosis, the risk of individuals having a psychotic disorder was roughly 3 times higher for those who use more potent THC, potency between 40 and 60%, compared to those who never use cannabis. Epidemiological data shows that 30% of users of cannabis present a variety of cannabis disorder. The U.S. Drug Abuse Warning Network estimated that in 2011 there were 456,000 drug-related emergencies in which marijuana use was mentioned in the medical record. In the U.S., there are 88 ongoing research studies on how to treat cannabis dependence. What are the TH dosages, potencies, administration routes, accumulation rates, consumer age, conditions and habits that trigger this brain damage in young people? What are the cumulative impact of use cannabis with other intoxicants? How will emergency and psychiatric services cope with an increase of cannabis disorder? Aren't they already overloaded with the opioid crisis, a legal pharmaceutical product that has caused a serious societal problem? What are the costs of providing addiction support and services to users who eventually will want to quit cannabis? Are we mortgaging the future of young First Nation Aboriginal peoples or those young people wanting to pursue STEM careers? Can we expect legal action from individuals and groups against the government and or private companies if this legalization experiment fails? All the facts and data I presented today include reference at the end of this speech. They show that the risk for harming the healthy development of young people through cannabis use and abuse is not only real but substantial. The legalization of cannabis needs a larger, integrative, and comprehensive strategy, and in its present form, C-45 appears to focus more on economical and criminal priorities. The government must put health consideration at the forefront, adopt a real and not only theoretical public health approach without promoting intentionally or unintentionally the emergence of an economic sector or use legalization as a political leverage to support an existing risky practice. Dear Senators, I invite you to work with me on shifting the focus of this legislation to prevention, education, and health, as was the intent. Thank you very much.
Senator Lankin, do you have a question?
Yes. Would the honourable senator take a question?
Would you accept the question, Senator Galvez? Senator.
Thank you very much. You made strong representation all the way through your presentation and wrapped it up in a very powerful way about the... Sorry?
May I ask you all for leave to extend Senator Galvez's for 5 minutes?
Great.
Thank you. You spoke about and you wrapped up with a strong plea for us to make the focus on public health real and not just theoretical, and I want to agree with you completely. I didn't have a chance yesterday to ask questions of the minister. I would have wanted to follow up on Senator Batter's question around youth and mental health in particular. One of the things that I'm very concerned about is that, you know, education, prevention education has to be a big platform. They're committed to it. There's lots to be sorted out to make sure that that's effective. But I don't see in this the focus of what we need to do to work on youth mental health issues, because quite frankly, people may turn to cannabis as a result of mental health issues, and or they may be exacerbated by a recreational use of cannabis and in one that wasn't preceded by a perceived need from the illness. I think there's much that can be done, but I wonder if you've thought about that particular angle of mental health and what a public health approach that you're calling for might look like in the context of this bill.
Senator Galvez.
Thank you very much for the question. Actually, you know, if you do just a very quick exercise and you assume that you are a 16-year or 18-year-old adolescent and you want to know how many joints you can smoke and at which potency before having some kind of danger for your development brain, you won't find these even after 200 results. However, if you assume the position of being a businessman that wants to create a cannabis, you will find in the first 20-something result everything that you need. So we have to put the information in a plain form, in information that everybody can understand, and of course, you know, ensure that in the products that will be sold, that all of the potential dangers are there.
Senator Bovenu.
Une question, la sénatrice.
I have a question for the senator.
Of course.
Alors, sénatrice,
Senator, congratulations on your speech, which is very precise, and it really hits the important targets. Yesterday we heard from the three ministers here, and we discussed the illegal market, which will continue to be present. In fact, that was confirmed in committee this week, and so did the RCMP. Apparently, 30% of marijuana would still be on the black market, and we know that illicit production is at the highest risk for health because it's not subject to any quality controls. We also learned that only people with production licenses, 40% of the investment comes from the illicit market. So we heard from the Minister of Public Safety. We propose that there be greater transparency with regard to producers to ensure that those who produce pot can be very transparent, and also for production to have the greatest transparency as to quality control.
There's supposed to be a tracking system, and you know, what this tracking system should do, two things in parallel: the economical aspect and the health aspect. And so far, it's only doing very little about consumption, so it's not enough. I think that this tracking system should track really very transparent. All the information should be there, and at a point, you know, we should ask. I'm sorry to say it this way, but I think that it is important to know who is getting rich out of this new emerging sector.
Sénatrice Bellemare, il reste 1 minute.
Senator Bellemare, 1 minute. Would the senator take another question? First, I'd like to congratulate you on the research that was done to prepare this speech. It's excellent. I would also like to know, because I have children, but they're well beyond the adolescence. I have consulted medical experts, and I was always told, well, listen, alcohol is much more dangerous than pot. So have you done research to assess the impact on young people of consuming alcohol and the quantity as well, as compared to blood alcohol concentration? Senator Galvez?
Oui, effectivement, toutes les autres drogues.
Yes, indeed. All other drugs exacerbate the effects of cannabis. And I can see that for myself at university, because a number of students who are in the science and math and engineering stream, they want to take cannabis in order to relax from the stress. But in fact, the opposite happens. It creates more stress. There are...
Impact de plus qu'une drogue.
Sénatrice, votre temps s'est écoulé.
Senator, your time has elapsed. I'm sorry.
Senators, all agreed? 5 more minutes. Sénatrice Galvez.
Senator Galvez.
La recherche est
Research is being conducted, and it is very important to understand the cumulative effects of a number of drugs. We talk about alcohol and tobacco, but we should also be talking about amphetamines. And in fact, there are a number, including cocaine, obviously. But to date, what we know is that all these other drugs worsen and exacerbate the effects of cannabis.
Sénatrice Marshall, did you want to ask a question? Sénatrice Dupuis.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam Speaker, I would like to put a question to Senator Galvez. Senator, I'm very sensitive to the aspect of prevention, and you did mention it in your speech. I'm wondering if you examined the matter of the type of messaging that prevention should focus on. What I mean by that is that we're dealing with a very complex subject here, that is a bill, or rather a product that is dangerous, but it has been authorized for medicinal purposes. And therefore, it is supposed to allay the person's symptoms. But it does not want, many experts don't want to recognize it for medicinal purposes. So it has been legalized for medicinal purposes. And there are patients who use it. And as you said, many of them are hippies. They're at an age now where they need to allay and their pains. And since at least 2013, it's been legalized. And this product has benefits for a certain category of citizens. And yet it is extremely dangerous for young people, as you said. So have you given some thought as to what type of messaging should be developed to ensure that prevention is effective? Thank you for the question, Senator. I think that the problem is that young people think that cannabis is both a drug for medicinal purposes, and so they really don't perceive it as being a high-risk product to consume. So its harmful effects are not as much in the limelight, or they're not conveyed to young people. So young people have the impression that this can be both a medicinal drug, that it relaxes them, and that is why it is being legalized, instead of realizing that it can be a very dangerous substance that is highly addictive and that can cause harm, especially to young developing brains. Up till the age of 25, it can be very dangerous. I'm sure that there are experts who could work on this messaging, but that is outside of my field of competence. Thank you. Senator Gagné, question? Would the senator take another question? Yes. Senator, I do believe that I understood from your presentation that cannabis consumers should have to deal with the consequences of their consumption. And you also talked about the price, that we should perhaps check with regard to price setting and taxation. We know that the tax that is going to be levied is 10% of the sale price. In Colorado, it's 30% tax rate. Washington, 37%. And so I was wondering whether price setting and taxation of this product, well, we know that these are tools that could discourage the consumption of cannabis. And also, perhaps the revenues could be invested in prevention, education, and awareness raising. So perhaps could you clarify what you meant by the fact that cannabis consumers, 30 seconds, that they should be the ones who have to cope with the consequences of consumption?
It's a very important question, and that's why I make the difference about these two parallel worlds in the medical sector, because you have the ones that are really in need for pain, for HIV, for cancer, chemotherapy, and they are receiving very, very small dosages of THC via different paths.
I'm very sorry, Senator, your time is up. No, thank you. We're moving on. Thank you very much. May I say a personal remark, Senators? Please, when you ask questions, skip the long preambles, because you just cut short. You just cut short Senator Galvez's interesting answers. So, Senator Martin.
Oh, did you have a question?
Senator Martin, are you taking the adjournment? Are you taking
Adjournment to the debate if it's concluded?
moved by?
Oh, sorry. Pardon?
Est-ce que je peux poser une question?
May I put a question? I thought that we had extended the time by 5 minutes. No, it was 5 minutes for the second time, and now that was the second 5 minutes, so now we're moving on. May I take the adjournment in my name? I already spoke.
It is moved by the Honourable Senator Martin, seconded by the Honourable Senator Cools, that further debate be adjourned until the next sitting of the Senate. Is it your pleasure, Honourable Senators, to adopt the motion? Carried.